We're back with Smarter Markets at IETA's North America Climate Summit 2025 in New York City. I have the honor of being joined by Ed Morse, Senior Advisor and Commodity Strategist at Hartree Partners, and Clean Hydrogen Transaction Advisory Committee Co-Chair and longtime advisor on the energy markets. It's great to see you again, Ed.
Likewise.
So I know you've all had a big announcement recently. Mike Prokop, who's been another guest of the podcast, and you have been working on a big project in the hydrogen space. I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about it.
So the project was really based on a recognition that the hydrogen market is really alive and kicking, despite all of the headlines one sees about hydrogen projects being abandoned, basically. And what we who look at the hydrogen market in detail know is that demand for clean hydrogen outweighs the supply and availability of it. And when you have a situation like that, where you know how to make it cleaner than it's been, and there is so much demand for it, you can help accelerate that market by helping to develop a benchmark for pricing it and help it make it more transparent by getting people to voluntarily provide information about their transactions in an anonymizing way to get a market going.
So why do you think the hydrogen market has kind of labored under this, maybe false news of its demise?
So the false news of its demise really has to do with what the headlines are. And I think what we see out of the U.S. has been a little bit more accentuated than what you see in the rest of the world. So in the rest of the world, you see projects actually going ahead, some of them being canceled, but there's government support behind them and a social intention to get to a cleaner world. And the hydrogen business is really about a cleaner world because hydrogen is not very new. It's been around for well over a century. And it's not a small market, it's a big market, but it's not a transparent market. So now that there are new uses potentially for hydrogen, and when you look out of the U.S., you see them growing, even with some, announcements of abandonment. You get more optimistic about there being a market. And in fact, the U.S. has hubs that are developing in a way which gives it an advantage over the big market like Europe or Saudi Arabia and the Middle East in general, or China to some degree, but certainly Japan and Korea. And that advantage we really share with Canada. And that is that we have a very large domestic market, and we have hubs in those domestic markets that are the logical places to really export from. And we see export developments in both of these countries, but especially in the United States, and especially out of the Houston Ship Channel, where there's been a very large hydrogen market for reasons I can explain. It takes me 2 seconds to do it if you want, and also California, among other places.
Well, I'd love you to explain, because you've spent a long career in the energy markets explaining and helping people understand them. And I'd love to know, where does hydrogen fit in that energy supply stack, right? Because we've seen the shale revolution on the oil side, on the natural gas side. Where does hydrogen fit into this U.S. energy supply mix?
So hydrogen actually is part of a revolution that took place in the energy sector about a century or so ago. It began with fertilizers, actually. So there were a couple of people, Europeans, who invented what's called the Haber-Bosch process. And that process was one that enabled people to take nitrogen out of the air where it's in abundance and put it together with hydrogen and make artificial fertilizer. And to give you a sense of how dramatic that revolution was, artificial fertilizer is what has allowed the world to grow from 2 billion to 9 billion people. Shortly after that, the fact that there was a way to get hydrogen from a process, and the process is called steam methane reforming, the refining business was getting going at the same time. And that's because transport vehicles were starting to use gasoline. And the refining process was basically a distillation process. And depending on the crude oil, you either got what you wanted or got too much of what you didn't want. And then, there was hydrogen that you found a way to get. And if you use hydrogen molecules to change the molecules of what you got from a distillation unit, you got upgrading units that allowed people to maximize their production in a refinery of gasoline or diesel, whatever they wanted to do. And then, since this started with refining at exactly the same time, petrochemicals were invented. And petrochemicals are exactly what happened in the upgrading of refining units. You use the hydrogen to change the molecular structure of other things, and you can actually put molecules together and invent new products. And the world has, really grown with the petrochemical industry dominating what is now energy demand or oil demand in the world. So it's old; it's a century old, and only recently have people thought about, in a more serious way in the past than they have in the past, other uses of hydrogen than this industrial gas use for basically fertilizers, refining, and petchems.
And where does the hydrogen come from? Is it coming out of the gas stream? Is it coming out of the oil stream, or independently?
So virtually all of the hydrogen used in the world comes out of the gas stream, comes from steam methane reforming. And when I say basically all, um, it's probably in the 85% range. Hydrogen can come uh, from other processes as well, and we're seeing the world inventing them all the time. Uh, so what we're looking at in the hydrogen world is a way to develop cleaner sourced hydrogen that can come from some really esoteric sources, if you want to look at the esoteric ones. And these include actually making artificial methane by using hydrogen molecules you get from somewhere and using carbon dioxide molecules and creating a renewable kind of natural gas. But what we're seeing in the hydrogen market as it started to develop is people getting hydrogen from emissions from waste products. The smart way people started developing it, and there has been a revolution already unfolding in this area, is that there were people in the warehousing business, you could name the companies, Walmart, Amazon, and the like, that have been using forklift equipment that they could, move away from diesel on by going electric, or they found a way to experiment with hydrogen. And when they did so, they started looking for places to get hydrogen. So where do they find relatively clean hydrogen for their purposes? And we can get into a debate about what's clean, what's dirty, depending on what the carbon intensity of the supply chain is. But you get very clean hydrogen vented by petrochemical plants. Uh, they produce too much hydrogen and they put it into the atmosphere. And you have an ability, or the world has an ability, to take that hydrogen, put it in a balloon, basically. It's totally clean. It has no chemical elements in it other than hydrogen, and move it to where you can use hydrogen in fuel cells or use it directly in a gaseous or liquid form, and actually, particularly the fuel cells is more convenient, get forklift equipment going. So now in the US and in other countries, including the UK and parts of Europe, the overwhelming majority of forklift equipment is already running on hydrogen and is clean. And if you're doing that, you can think about hydrogen in a delivery van. You can think of it in an urban setting, and we're seeing the transport fuel use of hydrogen already taking place, mindful that people had always thought that hydrogen was going to be great for transportation. And we can all remember the Hindenburg Zeppelin and its explosion, which set back hydrogen use in air transport for a very long time.
And when you think about, the project you're working on now, um, what does success look like for you in terms of developing this hydrogen market in the Houston area?
So the success really is related to what happens in the local Houston market, but also what's happening globally. So success, from our judgment, is, how do you define a benchmark for hydrogen? And the world has gotten used to the rainbow colors used for hydrogen. But when you talk about, blue hydrogen is better than gray hydrogen, what does blue hydrogen mean? So when you're trying to define something that is actually useful for trading, you define a tradable thing by location. We've chosen Houston as the location for it. You want to look at the state. We've preferred the gaseous to the liquid state, but you can do something on the liquid state as well. And what are the colors all about? They're about carbon intensity. So gray hydrogen, which is the preponderant form of hydrogen, comes directly out of methane and the carbon dioxide. If it's not sequestered, is then emitted into the atmosphere, which makes it dirty. So it has a very high carbon intensity index. We have it defined, and it's at over 11 grams per gram of carbon dioxide. We have low hydrogen, which is what is really going on in the world, whether it's Saudi Arabia exporting or the UAE exporting to Europe or even to Egypt, or whether it's a party exporting from Australia, Chile, or the United States or Canada to Korea and Japan. It's really like blue, but we have a definition of blue, as does Japan, as does Korea, as does the European Union, and we have found a way to put these definitions in terms of carbon intensity together so that it serves the purpose of U.S. Canadian exporters and importers in the Pacific Basin or the Atlantic Basin, whether those imports are coming from the Middle East or from North America.
And what are the next steps in the project?
So the next steps in the project are to work with people who are at the formative stage of making a market. Some of them are well known, some of them are less well known. We're working together with both the well known ones and the less known ones, the ones on the less well known side who have specialized in getting a lower carbon world and have specialized in developing benchmarks that are used in the world today. So our next step is to work with another party and to get companies to agree to provide anonymized data to backstop what the indices are all about, see how much they're being used. We think as this gets going, we have a wheel that we have advertised on how demand, which is higher than supply at the moment for clean hydrogen, will, with more transparency about what is available at what level of carbon intensity, that will spur on more supply. And when there's more supply, there will be efficiencies of scale, and there will be a lower price, and there will be more demand than people or companies who want it with a subsidy behind them or want it just for the purity of it. And meanwhile, as the market is developing, we are seeing in certain markets the price of hydrogen at less than $1 a kilogram, which makes it compete with the old dirty gray hydrogen.
Well, thanks so much. It sounds like a great project. Really looking forward to seeing how it develops. And thanks for stopping by to share your insights into it with us.
Thanks for asking me, and thanks to seeing you again.